Hey y'all, it is Moonlight Cowboy. So, as you're watching this, you kind of get the point here. So I figured this would be a good time to start my segue into the tutorial portion. This is a little bit different than the tutorials I've done up to this point because this isn't going to be like a tutorial on how to do this build. This is going to be more of like what I look for when I'm out on the wasteland, so, looking at other people's builds, and I'm like, oh wow, this is really good, but, and then part of where I'm at in my level of building, I'd like to say that I'm in more or less the upper echelon at this point. Most of my builds are pretty either really crazy or either way. I know a lot of the physics of the game and I know what people look for in competition building, things like that. So with that said, whenever I see somebody's camp, even if it's not perfect, I can appreciate how much time, effort, and beauty goes into it. But also, I want to help you elevate your camp. So this is a build that you just saw. This is a standalone build, and I don't normally do these. I don't normally do large builds like this because you lose some of that decor element because you don't have the budget for it. That said, I wanted you guys to see that I can actually do those, but more importantly, I wanted to use the building parts of this to kind of segue into what I look for in when I'm seeing camps out in the wasteland or whatnot. So rather than just go out and be like, oh yeah, this is really nice, I also want you to see what it looks like. By the way, don't ever build at that location. It was a nightmare because lightning was always striking. So tip 1, work with your environment, not against it. What I see oftentimes is people will try and fit their build into a beautiful cliffside, but then half of their build or their foundations are hanging over it or whatnot. Work with it, don't work against it. Like in this case, for example, somebody might have given up on that gate because it was open, but instead all you had to do was close the gate, and then I was able to get my my foundation through, right? But in this location, there's a lot of places that I wasn't able to put foundations, but I really wanted to use the gate here. Little did I know that my camp was just going to be bombarded by lightning. And so I ended up doing this video for this, for the camp and everything. And then, by the next day, I deleted it because I was never going to show anybody this camp when it was just constantly being struck by lightning. Anyhow, But like for instance, there's some areas, back further in, beyond the gate, where it wouldn't let me put the foundation down below the ground, down to the other level. So I just raised it up a little bit and created a raised walkway, rather than either give up on the build or do something hokey. And I think that still adds like a nice texture to the build. A lot of my best builds that I've ever done, they're not because I do go in with a really good plan, but it's the workarounds when you get in and how successful. For example, I couldn't build in a lot of those spots, see those dirt areas, because of the trees. So rather than just completely either give up or do something hokey, I turned those into natural flower beds around my camp, right? And that ended up looking pretty nice. Was I hoping I could clip my build through the trees? Sure. I would have had grass all the way around, or I call it grass, the foundations that are the shagrut carpet. I love using those for the grass. It's a better look than the astroturf. The astroturf, to me, I don't ever really use it. But like, see, I was able to use these rose bushes, and that really gave a nice extra texture, because even though you have the planters versions, which have like they're in the pots, it doesn't look the same, right? So in this case, like, I was able to remove the foundation and get them even more crammed in there, and it did give it an extra look, a nice look. So that will segue into my covering up my the sides of my foundations part coming up soon, because that's pretty important. But as you can see, this is kind of how my layout ended up being for this camp, because I kind of worked around those trees, and it added a little bit of detail. So tip number 2, go underground, it's safe. I know I did a tutorial on building underground. Just know that you can build underground. I do almost always build underground, even if the build is above ground. So for example, I'm building this roof platform right here, and it could just be to be hiding my generator, because I use the utility generator. It doesn't have to have any wires running around. But even if I did have wires running around, all the more reason to have your generator underground, unless you can merge it into something, or it's going to be part of your decor. But unless I absolutely can't build underground, like for instance, if I have a flying camp, I will always put my generators down there. This is the big one. Hide the sides of your foundation. So, it's easy to say underpinnings, underpinnings, underpinnings. And if you don't know what that means, there's a way to, which I have tutorials on. You can put catwalks on the side of your foundations and then snap a wall to them, so that way it hides the ugly side of your foundations. But there's other ways too. Like, look, I'm using the wavy Willard walls there to go ahead and hide my foundations that way. And then I get like kind of a little wall, and that looks nice, right? Or I can use the the rose bushes, or that you can use like some of the defensive walls, not just the wavy Willards. You could use the red stucco brick walls, or if you're doing a scrappy build, you can use the those scrappy defensive walls, right? So I just think it's like super duper important to hide those foundations. Now, I have had builds where I can't hide the foundations. I absolutely can't. So on those really specific situations, sometimes I'll use like the vault floors, because they're prettier looking concrete. They're the only foundations besides the enclave ones that have a different side texture. And maybe I'll use one of those, and then I'll cover up the ugly vault top with like a roof or something like that. But typically speaking, you want to cover up your foundations. That's like the first thing as like kind of like an upper echelon builder that you look for when you're looking at one of these camps, to see, oh, they didn't even bother covering their foundations, right? So, if you're looking to like, show off your builds, that's important. So this is kind of an interesting one for me. I love doing double walls because of all of the flexibility you get with them. You can wallpaper both sides, right? But I think oftentimes too, people overdo it, and then they just end up double walling their entire build, and sometimes that's okay. But we do have really good textures on our on some of our walls. I really like some of the walls that they've come up with over the course of time. I mean, a great example of that is the Brotherhood Barracks wall set. Looks amazing. The House of Tomorrow set, I think, looks really cool in certain circumstances. But the other thing too is not you don't just have to always double wall, but use a varying type of wall. Like in this build, for example, you see I have the glass walls, and then I also use the contemporary set, or now it's called, I think, the siding, the siding set or whatever it is. But there's several of my builds where like I'll have like 3 or 4 different wall types based on the window, and then I will double wall them. The other thing too is like if you notice with these glass walls, I'm almost never using the full wall because I don't like that bottom bar on it. So, get creative with, the different wall types because some walls will look great double walled. Some walls have a great texture on them. And also some walls have like very like minute detail in like the thickness of the wall. So when you're like doing wall merges, sometimes it'll behoove you to, double check and make sure your wall thickness is okay because then you might stop your wallpaper from flickering. But in this particular scenario, I'm using depth. So if you see, I have a catwalk there. And, one thing I don't like is like super boxy camps. So like to kind of break up the monotony of that, I'm recessing that wall slightly. So that way I get a little bit of like an alcove look, an overhang from my roofs naturally, without having to do any super roof magic, right? So, I have tutorials on how to do all these things, so this really isn't to go over like how I did this. This is more of the concept of like things that I look for when I look at a camp. And this didn't take any extra budget to do this. I lost a touch of interior space for doing this, but on a build this big, I didn't need a ton of interior space. All I really needed to do was, add some, contours and some like really nice detail to the camp to make it pop, right? So as you see here, taking it in that quarter catwalk length, it made it look really good, and then I can always go back and make some alterations too. Like, so for example, in this is a great wall example. Sometimes you flip a wall in one way, like these glass walls, perfect example. And then you have the glass walls on the other side, and then you just see like the edge of those glass walls on the other side, like that thin edge, and it looks kind of crappy. So you can then flip those glass walls. It's not going to mean much. Nobody's ever going to notice it from the one side that they're overhanging off the lip just a little bit. But when you're doing this, what happens is it looks flush with your wall on the inside. See, I'm catwalking them so that way they flip the other way. And now it's flush with that roof or that wall line, and that looks really sharp rather than just having them sit there. See how flush that looks walking through that hallway? Completely different, and it's just that little extra detail that could make the difference of like having a good camp to just a slightly better camp. So one other thing too I want to mention is, I don't see a lot of people using the like angled or slanted or, the different wall shapes, the fascia and things like that. It would be nice to see more of that in the larger builds. If you're doing like a modern build with a flat roof, it's one thing. But, to again, adding these roof lines means you're going to have to add different wall texture, wall shapes. And a bigger build should be more shapely, in my opinion. Again, unless you're going for like just like a factory, that would be something I would look at too. Now, what you're seeing here too, again, going back to like adding character or a little bit more contour to your build. I initially had a flat front out front, but because I even thought that was a little bit too blasé, I went ahead and added a wall coming out, and so only half of it is now going to have that 1/4 inch going in. So a next tip is roofs can make the difference between your build being good or being great. Roofs are super important. Roof lines are really important as well. So it's one thing if you're doing a super modern build, or some builds look really good with flat roofs, and that's okay. But on a build, especially for like these bigger builds, you don't want to have one big block. Nobody, unless it's like the whole premise of the camp is like the inside of the camp. Like I could see like one big block if you were making like a camp that looks like a present, and that was just a really theme specific deal. But for like a lot of these bigger builds like this, you're going to look at the roof line. That's going to be the thing that sets this camp apart. We talked about the walls, and you can see how like I kind of weave them around the trees to not only fit into the area better, but like it just gives it that extra pop. So like I'm doing all kinds of roof stuff here. I'm doing a little bit of an overhang because I brought those walls back. I'm running them at like where they're peaking in the middle, and then I'm running them at different angles throughout. And then when it's all said and done, this camp is going to pop, even though I really didn't have to do a lot of extra stuff to it, just because that roof line makes such a huge difference. The other thing too is with flickering or overhangs. I'll actually start with the overhang part first. See that roof line right there? All I'm going to do to get rid of that, this is really easy trick. All I'm going to do is I'm going to destroy this thing. And I've actually moved my roof up a little bit just by changing it from an angled to a not angled. Like I laid the first one flat and then angled it up, and then I added another one that is angled, and it changed the height difference on the roof just slightly. And then it's going to cover up that line coming up through the roof. And I see pro builders leave it to where you can see the walls coming through the roofs. Look how much cleaner that looks without those without the arches coming through the roof like that, right? So it is those little details where if you just put in just a little bit of extra time, you can get rid of certain things that you're like, oh wow, I wish it didn't look that way. But really, if you take an extra 10 seconds and think about like, I know that if I lay the roof down flat, then I know it's going to sit lower, but if I place the roof on the wall at an angle, it's going to sit a little higher. I could do both, and then I hit all the metrics that I need to make this camp pop a little bit extra, right? So again, roofs are like really, really important, and I know I'm big on roofs. I've done a lot of builds where I've only used roofs, or I've used roofs as walls. But I mean, just like if you're just doing a standard build like this, which I consider this to be a standard build. This isn't like oh my goodness, Boone, this is like the most amazing build you've ever done. Not even close. But I was encouraged to do a build where I just did like a larger build like this, and I decided to use this as like a stage to have this dialogue, so that way I could kind of go through like what I look for in camps when I'm visiting them. But you just don't want blocky camps. You want things that pop. You want like lots of edges, or you could do it flat too if it's like a modern style build, and that's okay too. One thing I also want to mention too, oftentimes, especially when I'm having a conversation like this about like, how you can make your camp better, I want you to know that like really it's about what you want. If you like function over form, you want to have all the workbenches, or if you just, that's your style, that's okay too. The perspective that I'm looking at it from is like, I've been doing the top 5 for a very long time. And I've had people that have talked to me and said, I don't understand. I really like my camps. Why don't I make the top 5? Or, hey, I keep getting, nobody ever likes my camps, or people come and I submit my camps to the best builds, and the only ones who ever like them are my friends. Whatever that purpose might be that they build for. If yours is that you want to show off your camps and make them look really special, then it is adding these extra details and putting that extra thought in there, right? So like on that right hand side, that second like pillar part, where that doesn't even have anything in it, I like closed it off, but I needed that to make this camp look a little bit more symmetrical. But as you can see, I did a few little extra tricks on this camp. There was nothing special about this camp, not particularly, other than the fact that I built it. I mean, I guess that's special. But because I added those roof lines, I added the way that I did the walls, and I made that like a little bit, more pizzazz. And it was just by putting a little extra consideration and thought in what I'm doing. Look, it ended up turning out to be a really good camp. Now, I'm not going to hang my entire channel based on a thumbnail of this camp, but, again, compared to, just not putting any effort or thought into the design, I think this came out pretty good. So for those of you who listen to me, thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Y'all have a blessed day, and you stay safe out there.